I will present you how to conduct a tourism economic study. And also I will discuss a little bit in detail the parts of the tourism economic analysis. And then I will cover one case study, principally one case study that I did in Brazil. We are doing for 2 years in a row now tourism economic analysis of the national parks, national protected areas in Brazil. And we developed a model called Tourism Economic Model for Protected Areas. I have one handbook here. It's in Portuguese, but you can see more or less. We are doing this every year now, doing these reports and promoting the protected areas to the society. So I would like to start the presentation with a question. Why we would do economic analysis of tourism protected areas? Why do you think this is important?
Can I venture a guess? Because they're often under political threat. So you need to really have the economics down in terms of that they do have economic value, so you counter the chances that you improve the prospects of protecting them. That would be my guess.
Correct.
If you don't protect them, people will not understand the value, will not be using them, and ultimately there will be some political interest and somebody who finds something to actually mine there. So.
Probably.
Or build a hotel.
Because the economic argument is the strongest regardless of politics.
Correct. Correct.
So this is the story of you joining the dark forces?
This is exactly what I would say. I came from ecology perspective, but I decided to go to the dark side of the force because politicians, they understand numbers, economic numbers, so you need to dialogue with them in the way they understand. First of all, economic analysis tourism is a ecosystem service. Protected areas, they provide a lot of ecosystem services, water, carbon sequestration, different services. The one that we have a methodology that is, people all over the globe, they agree with the methodology better, is tourism. So tourism is also one service, the services that those others provide. And economic analysis of tourism is important to estimate economic impacts due to possible changes in tourism demand. So if the tourism demand in the country, in the protected area is changing, you can measure those changes in ways, economic ways. You can evaluate effects of new public policies, investments, tax allocations, zoning plans. So if the government wants to bring a new investment to the park, you can measure what's going to happen, what happened in the economic impact, social impacts, ecological impacts is also this new investment. And so this economic analysis help you to understand what happens with the society around the park or communities inside the park in an economically way. Also, this kind of study help you to show to the society, to the politicians, economic interdependence. Not just hotels and restaurants that benefit from tourism, but there is a whole chain of enterprises and companies and people who benefit from tourism, and sometimes they didn't even realize that they are connected to the tourism industry. This methodology was developed in the United States in 1995, and then in 2000 the name is Money Generation Model, and in 2000 they made the Money Generation Model version 2, the second version, and in 2012 they started to call visitor expanding effects. After the United States, this kind of analysis is very common in economics. This economic impact analysis you have in different industry sectors, agriculture, they always show those data. Other different sectors, they show this kind of data. And National Park Service decided to do the same to show the economical importance of the parks. After the United States, other countries start to use this analysis also. Here we have Australia, Canada, also smaller countries or with less parks like Finland, even developing countries like Namibia or South Africa. They also use this kind of numbers and methodology. In Brazil also we are doing this for 2 years now, and we are having a lot of good impact from the society and the park managers interested in those numbers. It's also important to point that I'm part of the TAPAS group, Tourism Protected Areas Specialist Group, and we are having meetings to discuss this. We have a specifically task force about economic benefits of national parks and protected areas, and we are developing a handbook to be offered to any country who wants to do this kind of analysis. And right now we are finishing the handbook, and it's called Visitors Count, Guidance for Protected Areas on Assessing Visitation and its Economic Impact. I hope this handbook will be delivered soon. So why this analysis became so relevant is because those kind of analysis, they become popular for non-economists. Those numbers, people, the outcomes are numbers that most of people, everybody can understand. Park managers, they are not, in general, they are not economists. I don't know here in Armenia, but in Brazil, for example, they have different backgrounds. They are not really scientists. So this kind of easy way to show them the importance of the parks, they think that they take this information really well. You can do site analysis. You can do analysis of one protected area, or you can do the analysis of the entire country. And also you can compare countries. Using the same outputs, you can compare the countries. And the formula for the economic analysis of tourism is quite simple. You need to do number of visitors of the protected area or the system times the visitor expenditure, the average visitor expenditure for these visitors, and times multipliers. Multipliers is a coefficient, economic coefficient, that you use to understand the ripple effect in the economy. You apply economic multipliers to measure these ripple effects. Because I will explain later, the money that comes from the tourists goes to the hotel, and then from the hotel goes to other industry sectors. So, but basically the formula is this, and it's quite simple to start understanding how it works. And how we conduct a tourism economic study. First of all, we define what will be evaluated, because the definition of your problem or what the desired outcome is strategic to understand how much effort will you put on the study, how much will it cost, what kind of information do you need. Second, you need to identify variation in tourism activity. It's with versus without, instead of before and after. For example, Armenia, tourism is growing naturally. I don't know how much effort you are doing to grow tourism, but tourism is growing in a rate. If you don't measure, if you don't have a baseline, and you do some efforts to improve tourism, ecotourism in protected areas, if you don't have a baseline, you cannot say if your policy or investments are being beneficial or not. You cannot measure if you don't have a baseline.
So, but go back, sorry. What do you, still don't see with versus without instead of before versus after? What do you mean by that?
If for example, you do some investments and you measure the outcomes, how much economic impact
Of that particular investment.
If you don't do analysis before your investment, you cannot say that was just your investment that made number of visitors grow. You need to have a baseline you need to have a prior measurement. And if you have any questions, just please call me and we can interact more, and I will get a little less nervous. Third step is to identify study region. First thing in this economic tourism economic studies, we just measure local expenditures. And what I mean by that is we don't measure, for example, equipment, clothes that people buy in their home cities to travel to a destination, or flight tickets. This kind of expenditures are not measured in this analysis. We just measure money that are spent locally in the region of the park or the protected area. It's also important to define the size of the economic region. For example, in this study in MGM or in Brazil, we use 5 regions: rural, small metro, large metro, state, and national multipliers. This is important because small communities, the money tend to escape from the community faster than large populations. For example, in a small village, hotel will serve a Coke for the guest. This Coke he will buy in a local enterprise, but this enterprise will buy this Coke from Yerevan. So in two rounds, this money goes out of the community much faster than if in Yerevan, for example, if you have a park here in this region, the money will circulate more in the region. The ripple effect is larger. In the other side, in the small villages, you tend to have less, they are less industrialized, so you have more jobs per person in the tourism industry in the region. The third factor here is level of the analysis. You need to decide if you're going to do just local analysis, state analysis, or national analysis. The coefficients, the multipliers will be different in the analysis. I will talk to them later, about them later.
Sorry, because it's coming up, and maybe I'm not sure you can address this, but you have enough statistics in Brazil to be able to disaggregate, the local multiplier effect versus regional versus national. You have enough of these kind of input-output models or whatever you're using to come up with the multiplier effects.
We have a national input-output model, and then we work with a guy from who developed the MGM, and we are using population as a proxy to develop the regionals and locals multipliers based in the national input-output model. You have different ways to do that. You have location coefficients, and you have this proxy using population. That this guy, he has a PhD about that. He developed it with his student of Steins, who was the guy who developed the model. So I can say the population is the best, has the best correlation to the multipliers. This is one that we are using.
The multiplier measures the impact, the financial impact, or the value impact. Meaning, if the money turns around, let's say 5 times, right? 5, that's a 5 multiplier.
Yeah.
But if also the value of the building, the value of the estate increases because of more tourism, that value, increase of value of equity versus value of cash flow, what does it measure?
No, it measure the ripple effect, doesn't measure the value. For example, if you build a park and the areas are surrounding the park, if they raise their value,
that's not included.
That's not included. It's a different economic kind of study.
Okay.
We measure how much money is spent in the community through tourism. Fourth step, you need to define your key economic segments. This is very important to define your surveys, your multipliers, and the presentations you're gonna do. Normally, tourism, we work with accommodation, meals, transportation, souvenirs, for example. In some developing countries, I'm working with some people in Africa. It's important tips to them, gratitudes. Also, trophy hunting, how much they pay for the trophies in consumptive tourism. There's a different kind of tourism they have there. So these economic segments are important you to define prior to start the study. And fifth, you need to define measurements of economic activity, your outputs. You're gonna see in the literature is most common are sales, jobs, income, value added, that is GDP, and taxes, how much taxes is generated by the tourists. And last step is define your levels of tolerable error. You need you have to decide between precision and accuracy, and in a way that depending on the information that you're looking for, you need less effort or more effort. If you need better data for better decision, if you're doing, if you just want to know how much is the economic impact of the parks, you have to have a level of data. You can stand more error in your statistics. But if you are deciding about investments in parks, in protected areas that government is doing, for example, paving roads or building visitor centers, you need to go and get better data to have those decisions made with more accuracy. I don't know if I was clear. Yes, and you have these three components: visitor numbers, visitor expenditures, and multipliers. And you have to manage the errors in each one of those components in your study. Steins also says that we have three levels of accuracy that you can have for each of those variables. In the first level, you just invite experts. You find an expert who gives you some judgment about your local area, and you can do a quick dirt equations and calculate a little, very roughly, the economic impact of your protected area initially or your system. And if you need better information, if you see that it's what you want, you can start looking for secondary data or existing data from your country, from your site, or from similar countries, similar protected areas. You can look for this data. And if you really need the information to use this information in a quite more strategic way, you collect primary data or develop your own statistical models. This is just some water for us to refresh a little bit. There's a lot of information.
I'm actually going to grab a bottle.
Yeah, please.
There's water back there.
Okay, so I'm gonna. Anyone has more questions about what I just presented, or I can continue going to the variables.
I do, but it's a. So you named the number of factors that you counted resulting from visitor presence. Is it ever possible to simply say that the mere presence of a visitor, anything that visitor does, should be measured? So that any economic, it doesn't matter whether you mentioned restaurants, souvenirs, these sorts of categories. Well, you can't, there are other categories that you can't see. So is it not possible to say that this visitor's presence, any economic activity generated by the visitor's presence is attributable to the asset?
Such as learning language learning by the locals.
Anything. Let's say he gets, puts his dog up for grooming for the day because he brought his dog and he wants to go hiking. I don't know. That's the point. I don't have to make it up. I don't have to foresee every variable. His mere presence, the fact that he's there at all, is due to his desire to be a tourist. So any economic impact that he has at that moment, is that not attributable to his presence?
Economic impact in
Yes.
terms of cash?
Yes.
Or in terms of, Alan said something intangible, like educating locals or like helping.
Tangible. So he was speaking
So you're
of,
talking about spending, basically.
precisely,
He
so.
could be spending
revenue.
either on direct services for his, or he made some incidentals that not everyone does.
So he was counting the categories
Yeah.
and saying, we look at restaurant expenditure, which is something that CBDs, and I should really do I mean, it feels like I mean, should I just, no?
No, keep
Okay,
going.
you sure? Promise me, because I don't want to be rude,
Maximum I'm gonna say is that I don't know.
Okay, well, the CVBs that run a lot of tourism, they measure economic impact mostly by room nights, by the number of times visitors stay in hotels. That's one of their main, metrics, right? We submit, in using the rest of his method, that's not a correct way to look at the economic impact of the revenue generation of a visitor. That anything that he does, this visitor, anything that this visitor does, is attributable to the fact that this visitor is a tourist.
The only
So-
question would be, how do you capture that? Is that
Exactly.
something you capture?
And this brings it back to the level one. You may not be able to capture it completely, but does that mean you should not attribute some net economic effect
Some
to
adjustment
that?
factor.
Precisely. And it sometimes can be quite a large result. So what that does is I'm sorry, please.
What I would say that depends of how much, the level of information that you want. If you are working with one specific park or site, and you have a very important, this is very important to that region, maybe you should count this for this. But if you are thinking in national level, it's very difficult to get this. This would come in other expenses. All those other expenses will come in one together. And this is dependent on the level of information you need. Depending of if you are thinking of putting places for dogs in your park, for example, for them to specific for them, and then you can do this kind of specific analysis. Or if you have a very developed, if you're doing this for several years and you have this methodology working pretty well, and you want to go to step 2 or 3, and then I would say to go to gather this more specific information.
Would it not be possible to build a confidence model by having lots of the data be level 1, but a small portion of it be verified by level 3? And say this is an average tourist spend, and it's that asset that creates that spend, not the hotel, not the restaurant, not any service available, but the fact that the tourist's presence. So the revenue is attributable to that asset, not to the fact that the ability to spend that revenue is there. The hotel doesn't create the revenue, that asset does. Therefore, you can value that asset and its revenue creation, even though it doesn't actually produce any direct revenue.
I'm not saying that the hotel is creating the value, continues to be in the asset, even if the
You and
money
I
is
agree
coming
on that.
from the hotel. I think it depends of the level of effort you want to put on the analysis. You can always get better information.
Can you check credit cards expenditures of tourists?
Yes, I don't know if they will allow you to get this information.
Banks can allow you without personification for tourists, but they can give that information.
And the question would be, do you have the some of the clear expenditure categories, hotels, food, other category they can have, medical expenditure, people like they come here, they buy stuff, and like whatever it is, so this other kind of category should be in the model somehow.
I say that they can do in a model. I don't know if when you have to put this information that will be useful for you. I don't know, for example, if you don't have did any economic study in a country, for example, in Armenia. I don't know if you have done any. if you are doing, I don't have information that you are doing this kind of studies.
No, no, no. I think we don't have any input models of the country, and we don't certainly have not at the local level.
So I would recommend starting with the segments, economic segments that everybody is collecting that are easier to measure. In this case,
And I just say I absolutely support and agree with what you're doing there. It's because I noticed, and having spoken with these CBBs, some of them last week, I was on the, emailing with one last night. This is the kind of thing that they're wondering about, and to move the attribution.
And CBB is what?
A Convention and Visitors Bureau. They're the people who track spending in a destination. So they're responsible for saying, they many times produce a figure that says, this tourist will probably spend this much. This is how much an average tourist spend is. And they all know that to the dollar. So they're getting that data somehow. What his model helps us understand is it isn't, as oftentimes is presented, the hotel or the restaurant that's creating that revenue. It's the asset that creates the revenue. And this is a change we need to make in order to value correctly protected areas and their contribution economically, is what I'm saying. I'm extrapolating that from his work.
for example, in Brazil, we are moving now from just getting the local expenditure. We are working to measure how much people spend in airplanes to come to the parks. It's another big part of the ecotourism industry that we like to measure. We are going to measure the presence of the park in the community, the investments we do in the parks, the jobs created through the park service, how much they impact the community. Those are other variables that we are also measuring. Depends on what we want to do with the data.
We should let you go on. So
Yeah.
Please, absolutely.
So, but probably this will come back when we talk about expenditures. So, but first of all, let's talk about visitors counting. And I think we can spend a little some time here because you don't, what I was talking with Ellen, you don't have this kind of studies here in Armenia. And if you have, you said 13 protected areas, right?
Yeah.
You may not be so difficult to conduct a study to count visitors here. And
Okay.
you don't need to count, you can estimate visitors also. This is what I'm
This
going
is
to-
where we would need models, because I think certainly there's no, in like Tilichan National Park, there's a few hundred entry points. I mean, where do you capture that number? The visitor center itself only captures 600 of the tens of thousands that come. So it's very difficult. I mean, unless you model it, you understand how you're gonna estimate.
We have a lot of examples in other countries, how they deal with this, how they deal with the situations where you have multiple entrances, points that people doesn't go doesn't pay a gate fee or doesn't go to your visitor center. First of all, you need to decide what you're gonna count. Different countries, they count differently. And in Brazil, for example, we count visits. So if someone spent 2 or 3 days in the park, we count them 3 times.
So it's 3 visits.
3 visits. The second thing you need to decide and how you're gonna count. And you have 3 different ways to count: direct, indirect, or automatic. Indirect counting methods are proxies you use to measure the number of visitors. For example, you can use parking or entrance fees, permits or license for guides, for guided tours, guest recordings, accommodations. You can do work with the hotels in the region and ask them to give you the information. For example, in Bonito, in Brazil, all the hotels, they sell the tickets for the park. So the ticket comes in 3 or 4 paper layers. So you give one to the visitor, you give one stays with the hotel, one you need to give to the park manager. So it's a way to track how many visitors are coming to the areas. They are sold in the hotels. You have entries in the guest books. You have guest books in visitor centers. You have guest books in trailheads. You can also track signs of use. Those are good for monitoring ecological impacts also. And then the second way is direct counting methods. You can count on the site, you can observe on cameras, count on the cameras, or you can use drones or airplanes and take pictures of people in the area. Those work well in lakes or marine protected areas, and you can count people. Those one are more, you need more people to do the work. You have more people you have to have, it's more labor cost. You cost more labor to people to do this kind of work. And you have automatic counting methods. They are mechanical or electronic, and you can put in different places. Those electronic counters, they are pretty interesting. You can put them on the trail, on the road, under the road or the trail. Or they use laser or they are magnetic. They count when the car goes and comes back. You have those ones. They are pretty small. They are $200. You can put on a tree, in one tree, on one gate when people pass by, and they count when people go and when people comes back, and you can use this information. And so these are the three different methods you can use, and you can mix those methods when you have complex areas to do those and in complex protected areas you can create a model. And to do that, you have to decide a sampling strategy. You decide where you're going to count, or in entrance gates, parking areas, remote places, when you're going to count, high season, low season, entire year, once a week, or 4 hours. So, for example, in some complex areas, you define how many sites you're going to count during the year, how many days in high season, how many days in low season, how many weekdays, how many weekends. And from this sample of the population of visitors, you can build your annual number of visitors. You don't need to be counting everyone every time. Those models exist. We have manuals too. We have some manuals, one from the National Forest Service, another from the Park Association to build those models and decide the size of your sample. And I think some master students can do this kind of analysis on 13 parks.
How much tourists pleased that they are the objects of total control, counted every time?
Can you repeat, please?
How much tourists pleased that they are object of total control?
What is the visitor's reaction to being monitored that much?
In this way, they actually don't know that they're being counted. They're just being counted for a laser tag that when he passes, or people when they enter his fee, they count the number of visitors. But we are going to get in the surveys, and then I can talk a little bit about that. Okay? Just give me 1 minute. And in this guideline that we are developing in the TAPAS group, I will come back to this later, to have this decision tree to help park managers to decide what kind of model the protocol they're gonna do to define their sample. And park managers, I am a park manager, they don't like to have a lot of decisions. They like someone to tell them what to do to get the information. As much as easier it is to get the information, most of the time they will participate because they have a lot of things to think about. So at least in Brazil, if you give them manuals and decision trees, it's much easier to them to participate in this kind of studies, for example. So I don't know if you can read, but really fast, you ask if your park.
By the way, just to pause on that moment, it'd be good for us to have park managers who have PhDs. Right? Just observation. Thank you.
In Brazil, we have our agency promotes park managers to take a leave and study and come back, or study have a few hours of the week they can study, and it's helping a lot. We are doing some work with USAID and National Forest Service from the United States. So some park managers from the United States, they come and they give us workshops in the subjects that we are failing, and sometimes the USAID sponsor us to go to the United States and visit some protected areas and learn there. It's been really interesting to do that. So for example, in the model, you ask if your park has data. If yes, the data is good, yes, so you have your visitation figure. If the data is not good, can you rely on expert knowledge to adapt the data? If yes, you have your visitation figure. If no, you go to design a visitor counting program. So this is make it easier for the park manager or even for someone who is designing a study to understand the process. I also want to show this table, and for example, I'm saying that Brazil, I'm showing this table where we have different countries show how they segment the tourists to do those kind of analysis. For example, in Germany, they use day and overnight visitors. There are two segments. In Finland, they use 6 segments, day versus overnight visitors, and then they divide by residents, foreigners, domestic from the country, and local visitors. And in USA, they have much more. They have not much more, but they have 7 different segments: locals, local day, no local day, in-park lodging, in-park camping, out-park lodging, out-park camping, stay with friends or family. So every time you add another segment, you need to have a larger sample to collect this information. So if in Brazil we have local and no local, because we starting the process, we don't have a lot of information, we don't have yet a lot of money to do several surveys, so we are using just 2 segments so we can work with smaller samples and are less costed the analysis. This was what I was talking about visitor counting, and it's pretty doable if you work with these protocols and you develop a methodology so you can do an estimate of the even in the region, national park. I think you can, with some students you can, and one PhD student, for example, you can design a model, or even a master's student. The second variable of the equation is visitor survey. And in visitor surveys is where you need the segments, because they spend money in different ways. For example, locals and no-locals, they spend money in a different way. Local, for example, they don't spend money in accommodation. And they normally spend more money in fuel because they have their own cars. And no local visitors, they will stay in the region, they will buy food in restaurants, so they spend money in different way. As if you can get more segments, you will have better data, but the cost of the getting the data will be more costly. Second, you need to develop visitor expenditure profiles to describe average expenditure. This is the profiles that I'm saying: local, no-locals, day visitors, overnight visitors. And you need to determine the portion of visitor spending that is attributable to the park visit. Because not all the money that is spent in the region, you can attribute to the park. For example, if someone comes, let's say I'm coming to Armenia to do a conference, to participate in a conference. If I go to a park, in the same day that I'm coming to the conference, I cannot say that the money that I'm spending in the hotel is because the asset is the park. The asset that made me come to Armenia was a conference. It's different from the day that if I have a free day here and I go to the Diligent National Park, the money that I spend in that day will be, the asset is the park. Okay? And One thing that is important when we do surveys, I don't know here, but people that I know, we tend to put a lot of questions in the surveys. We have very large surveys, and if a visitor come and see that you have a survey with 4 or 5 pages, they get really upset with you. So it's important before developing a survey to understand why you need each of the questions that you are putting in the survey. For example, for this kind of analysis, expenditures, average expenditure, expanding per visitor analysis, from all this information you can ask to visitors, you just need those 4 ones. Trip characteristics of the trip, importance of the protected area to the trip of the person, local area expanding, and demographics of the population. For example, in Brazil, our survey has 10 questions. It's 1 page, and we were doing on-site with tablets, but now we are asking people if they are willing to do the survey, and if they are willing to do the survey, they give us their email, and then we just send the survey. You can do in Monkey, SurveyMonkey, for example. We just send them the survey, and if they are willing to respond, they respond the survey after the trip. And this is, I think that is the best way, because when they are in the park or coming out of the park, they are still spending money. So when they answer the survey during the trip, they are not quite well, they don't know quite well how much money they are spending. If they take too long to respond to the survey, normally they don't remember, they don't recall how much money they spend. Ideally, is to them to fill the survey the week they come back from the trip. It's the best time that the economic data of the survey will be better, more reliable. Yes.
What's the difference in response rates, minimum versus on-site? How much is it dropping?
6%. Yeah.
It's dropping.
Yes. Yeah, because on-site we got everyone. Yeah. But I think 6% in a email survey is not bad.
So 60% less or 60% of?
Of.
It's high.
Yeah. Because we ask people if they're willing to do the survey, so
There is a preparation.
yeah, there's a preparation. People get interested.
So you don't send it to those who are saying
Sorry.
You're not sending it to those who are saying no.
Yes, we have this error. This.
Corruption bias.
And this is a bias that every survey has, because we only survey people who are willing to do surveys. So we never survey people who are not willing to not survey.
This isn't an opinion survey, so,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't change, just because you're willing to answer a survey doesn't change your opinion, like it does in a political survey. So you're still getting information.
Right. So these are the variables that we use to identify origin. We are using the zip code and the state the person is coming from, to know if the zip code or the state, to know if the person is local or non-local. We are getting country, but we are not getting, the samples are still not good for us to have 3 segments. Duration, we ask them how many days or nights they are spending in the region, so we can divide the amount of the money they spend in the number of the days they are spending in the region. We ask them party size to know if they are responding by themselves or if they are responding to the entire party they are participating. So we can divide the money to know per person per day. And then average spending in those economic segments: accommodation, meals, gas and oils, local transportation, fees, and retail shopping. And also, if they don't spend money, it's also important to ask, because there is a lot of people who have some urban parks, and some people, they don't spend money. So we need to count those people also. We ask them if they're coming to the region because of the park or not. So we exclude all the casuals, people who are in the region not because of the park. or not come to that day in the region because of the park. And for the people who come to the region, because we have parks, for example, in Rio de Janeiro, we have Christ the Redeemer. That statue is a national park, and people go to Rio for several different reasons. The park is just one attraction. So we ask them percentage of the decision to come to Rio was because of the park. So we just use that portion of the money they spend. With this kind of information, we can clear better the data and be more realistic, not extrapolate a lot with expenditures that are not related to the park, to the protected areas.
So I have one question.
Yes, please.
If we say, for example, for the importance part, let's say they came to Rio de Janeiro and they wanted to visit 5 places. That's the reason that they came. So does that mean the importance is like 20% was to go to Christ the Redeemer?
Yes.
So that's how it was.
Yes. I would say that we can have different ways to measure that, but this is the easiest one we found to measure with just 10 questions, and we are using this information just to understanding the dependency of the protected area to the local economy. So this kind of information is being useful to present to society.
This is very sensitive because if, let's say, the national tourism marketing does zero marketing in protected areas, then you're likely to get less share, like the importance would be lowered. Someone be more incidental, people just find out about it, go or whatever. But if there's a very strong marketing of protected areas, you're going to have more people saying that's the reason I'm here.
Yes.
So it's very marketing dependent.
Correctly. And also, some people measure to know if they know they are coming to a national park or protected area or not. This is important to know if they are being more educated about the subject. For economic matters, it doesn't really matter because if they are coming to see the rock symphony, or they are coming to the National Forest of Coast Road, they are spending the same money, even if they don't know there is a national forest there. But you can have other questions to understand better how they are, if they are understanding, being educated about the environment. Those are the two first segments, variables of the equation. The third one is the economic analysis. We have two different measurements. We are following the USA model to that. We do economic contribution analysis and economic impact analysis, and our results show both results. And what this does is a contribution analysis. We count locals and non-locals. And in the economic impact analysis, we count just non-locals, tourists. Definition of tourist is someone who travels from one city to another to visit tourist attractions, more or less. So, and in economically way, we are saying that money that was not circulating in the community, in that village, in that region, and came from outside to that region. There are some philosophical understanding if this is more important, the money that comes up from outside or the no-local money. But so this is why we count both ways, because some people says, I'm not going to that, but we are going to do, we have those two different measurements from the entire contribution of the protected area and the impact of the protected area bringing new money to the region. Normally you're gonna hear economic impact studies, but most of the studies are doing economic contributions. They are counting locals and non-locals. And about economic effects, I want to know if you know the difference between direct effects, indirect effects, and induced effects.
I have a sense of it,
Okay, so quick explanation. Direct effects is the money that comes from the pocket of the tourist to the shops in the region, for example. So the money comes from the tourist and goes to the restaurant. Indirect effect, the money from the lady, the owner of the restaurant, she needs to buy supplies to serve the tourists. So the money that she gives to the supply, the farmers, it's the indirect effect. The induced effect is because the lady who works in the restaurant, she gets her income, her salary, and then she needs to buy supplies for her house. She goes to grocery store, she puts food in the car. So the money that comes from her for her own needs is the induced effect. And we talk about direct effects and total effects that include induced and indirect effects. And we drive this information from input-output models, from economy. This is one very aggregated from Netherlands, and using some calculations, Leonchef matrix, you can draw the coefficients for this kind of tables. I was searching a little bit about Armenia. You have some initiatives doing I/O tables to Armenia in the national level. So it's possible to, I don't know if you already have some coefficients and multipliers.
We're not there yet.
But there is a lot of literature how to develop those coefficients and multipliers, and we also can, if you want to do some work together, we can. I and some people that we are working together. We can help you to develop those multipliers. And for example, this is for Brazil.
It's being recorded, by the way.
Sorry?
It's being recorded.
Okay.
Committed to it.
Oh. Just 1 second.
There's an output here.
I borrowed this from the hotel. It's working pretty well.
They said they didn't have one when I asked.
I'm sorry. I'm also getting free stuff.
See, it's a national thing, it's a culture.
First.
Well, no, I had a great day, I got a lot of free stuff too. We should do an economic analysis.
Those are the multipliers for the rural areas in Brazil, direct effects and total effects. Jobs, I'm going to explain the outcomes later, but jobs, income, value added and sales. And the sectors are accommodation, eating and drinking, amusement and recreation, terrestrial transportation, retail stores, and wholesale trade.
Is that reais or?
No, these are coefficients. So
No, you have the jobs per.
yeah, for 1 million heads, for 1,000 heads.
Yeah, that's it, I'm just making sure.
But it's in a coefficient that's
Understood. Great, you
You
could
can
work
do
with
it
any
in-
currency, I
yes.
just wanted to make sure.
And this is in the tourism industry, or this is overall economic?
This is for the tourist segments of the economy. When you decided which segments you're gonna use from the economy, so you use just those lines and in the IO matrix.
Is this it?
Yes. To calculate those multipliers, it's important to define the size of the survey area. For example, for rural, we use 5,000, population of 5,000 people. Small metro to 10,000 people. No, 10,000 people, 50,000 people for small metro, 500,000 people for larger metro, and then we have capitals that we use capitals and state, and then national multipliers. And the level of economic development of the region will affect the multipliers. So with more regions, they have different multipliers from larger regions, and also affects the expenditure structure of the multiplier will be different in small regions than larger regions because the expenditure structure of small areas are different from larger areas. Other thing important to consider when you are doing this analysis is you don't put the entire money that visitor is spending in the model. You need to calculate the capture rate. It's the amount of money who stays in the local community before you apply the multiplier. Because, for example, if you are using petrol, oil, most of the costs to extract the oil doesn't come from the country. So you need to do use the capture rate to do this fine tune in the model. Those are the expressions that I'm using in Brazil, and they are most common in several different analyses. Sales, how much are being sell, business to business and final sales to customers. Value added, measures rents and profits, personal income, and direct business taxes, corresponds to the final price of the product or service after removal of costs of production. It's GDP. It calculates GDP. Labor income refers to owners' income and salaries. Both, when you say labor income, is from the owner and also the employees. Tax is the amount of taxes generated to the total economic impacts, and jobs. And when we say jobs, we consider full-time jobs, part-time jobs, and seasonal jobs. So if you say, if you have 4 part-time jobs, you say you have two jobs generated by that area, for example. You consider 1 job per year, and then you sum them to entire full-time jobs. And the most important part of your study is to communicate. This is my daughter. So, for example, United States, they are the best to communicating. So, for example, they show this kind of graphic, and they show how much is the budget of the national parks and how much is the impact. So this is really important for the local economies to understand the difference. They show, for example, the average American household pays $2.56 in taxes each year for our national parks. It's a little more than a drink at a local coffee shop. So this is to use images to show how much money they are spent in taxes for the parks, for the protected area system, is important to the society to understand the value of those areas, or how cheap is to keep those areas if you consider the entire economy of the country, for example. This is another analysis from the outdoor recreation industry, the entire United States. If they consider the parks, recreation parks, outside protected areas, they are considering flights, everything. They say that people are spending annually $887 billion in the American economy in outdoor recreation, creating 7.6 million jobs, and you have tax revenues, state and local revenues that are being generated. This kind of information is really important for politicians to do lobbying. This industry in the United States is becoming really huge, and in a sense helps to protect the areas also, because you have players in the political scenario that wants to keep the areas protected because it's their asset. They are making their money from those assets. Even if it is sustainable tourism or more other types of tourism, sports, for example. This is another.
If you could go back to the other one. So here, $887 billion spent. that could be me coming for a convention and then incidentally going to a park, right?
Yes.
So it captures whoever visits, their entire expenditures as captured as part of it. So there might be double counting. If you do the conventions or conferences versus protected areas, there will be double counting. There will be no overlapping spend.
I don't know in the detail how they do the survey. To respond to your question, sorry.
I have to
Please
add
don't double count.
to his point that argument right there is sometimes the only argument that we have right now. There is no other argument that's being successful other than that one right now.
Or for example, they say that people are annually spending more money on recreation than in education, for example. This is also strong information. Or for example, people are spending more money in water sports gear than in movie tickets, or in cycling and skateboarding than in video games. This is powerful information to show.
Why recreation is not education? Recreation also education and more powerful than education, you have strict education when you come to a guide and learn about the flowers and the birds. But also, I do a lot of sports in nature, and this is a kind of education in a way that, for example, if I want to visit an area, and I like to run, so I run to the area, and I'm learning a lot about that protected area running, for example. I mean, you can connect sports and education also. There are different segments, but don't think about education just guided tours, for example. Look, guided tours when you have a guide and a school, and then you're explaining nature to the kids. Some people, they just want to walk through nature and benefit from that experience, feel the fresh air, because they were educated and then they learn the importance or intrinsic importance of nature, for example.
In the previous chart, the education that you have is the foremost.
Oh yeah. Sorry,
So
he was asking about that.
I think that's
Yeah,
just
sorry.
how would you spend on schools, and of course recreation has education component in it.
journey is initially a form of life education.
Yeah. Except this is in the formal economic sense. This is where
Yes.
the school spending on school.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Also, education is consumer spending. A lot of education is subsidized.
Yes,
So the budget of education is clearly.
you're correct.
It's interesting that the top in here are the health parts, which you could reduce by shifting it over to the outdoor recreation.
Yes, there are a lot of studies that now doctors are recommending people to go outside and enjoy nature. They do benefit health, have health benefits. I was talking about national level. This is another American study about local protected areas. So even local protected areas, they have a huge impact. So not just well-known national parks, but those urban areas you have close to your community, they also generate a lot of money. Parks Canada also have those kind of information. This is how they show their assets, how many people, how much people are coming, how many campsites occupied per year, how many employees, budget, and then they show contributions to GDP, jobs, labor income, tax revenues. Finland also presents, this is an example of one national park, is Paiha, Luosto National Park, and how much money people is expending the park, 83 euros in average. Foreigner visitors spend 157 euros, and they show how much is the impact to the park.
So I have one question. Let's say I'm a country like Armenia. From your experience, who takes initiative to do these types of studies? Is it like on the university level they decide they'll be in charge, or for example a governmental agency? From your experience, who usually is in charge of these types of studies?
We have different countries, different initiatives, but I would say here in Armenia, because the university is decided to do a conference and bring some experts, I would say the university will be like leading this process, probably taking the data or working with the protected areas agency.
Someone would have to pay it.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if it's the university or an institute or whatever agency, the state has to make the decision to pay for this knowledge.
Yeah, but I can say in Brazil, I started with my PhD and my connections with park managers, and was the cost of my PhD to do the first study, for example. My agency gave me a leave to study. They keep me paying my salary to do the study, and all the data collection was volunteer by my colleagues that are protected area managers.
So it's an interesting thing. You send the protected area director to study, and that itself is the study. It comes back with results and gets a PhD in the process. So it's kind of 3-4 years of analysis, someone gets a degree out of it, and then you bring the whole methodology to it.
But now it's taken on by the Tapas group. Guys, you introduced that group of colleagues you had, the Tapas
Yes.
group. They are the ones that are doing it now? Or?
No, we are doing a manual to help countries to do those analyses.
Tapas is international,
Oh,
Brazil
right.
specific is international.
Yes.
Is it a national agency or it's
I work I get my wage, my salary from the national federal agency in Brazil, but I also do volunteer work to IUCN, that is an international arm of the UN for conservation, and a group of specialists from different countries. They want to get together and share information, so we have emails group. We get together in, for example, next year in the World Conservation Congress, we'll have a meeting. So it's just people from all over the world that are interested in tourism and protected areas, and they share information.
one more question? The data that you are collecting from the surveys, who is analyzing? Is it again your agency or it goes to the statistics?
It's my agency, basically me. I'm analyzing the data, and now I'm teaching some people in the headquarters also to analyze the data and learn how is the process. So when I was not there anymore, some other people could continue the analysis.
And based on what kind of software you are doing this? Or
Excel.
is it like interlinked with the national survey, national statistic analysis, or it's a separate?
It's very basic analysis. We use Excel to just
Okay.
define the average expenditures. We use some web service to define samples. For example, we put out a population of the park, of the system, and we get the samples.
I see.
And this, another kind of related question, John may also have something to say about this, and maybe follows. The stereotype of the ecotourist in Armenia is that they come and they don't spend anything. They just walk around, eat minimal, they just like breathe air and drink water for free, and they just maybe buy a little bit of stuff here. They go. So is that an accurate stereotype? Or, how do we redefine the ecotourist? It's like, I think it's part of like, you're saying they're spending 160 euros per visit. I don't think our ecotourists spend anything like that, or do they, and we miss it? I mean, this is kind of part of what we need to understand. How do we capture that impact?
We are teaching ecotourists to have less impact, so they are spending less money. This is how do you say, a paradox?
If,
No, I'm kidding. I'm just making it.
first of all, we have to educate
Armenians not to give away so much stuff. I'm also kidding. The real answer to your
free, he's been getting.
yeah, I've been getting a lot of, it's great, I like it, but it's also not sustainable in the long term. I can see how that would be a drain on the nation's finances to give away. But seriously, that's not true. It's actually the opposite of the truth. That doesn't mean that, as he's laid out for us, that you don't have to define the ecotourist by where the ecotourist comes from. If the eco-traveler is from a local eco-traveler, perhaps that is the appearance, but you're not currently, I'd imagine, when you say that, tracking the expenditure. And what we've learned, there was a study done in Thailand by the Thai government in 2013, it was released, but it still holds true today, that ecotourists, eco-travelers actually spend more. There are lots of reasons for this, but they're also less expensive. So not only do they generate increased revenue, but they display more rapid ROI for tourism investment. They're early adopters, so if you open up an area to visitors, everyone will tell you, well, Americans won't come there because it doesn't have the right kind of infrastructure. You need to have this for Americans and that for Americans. Well, eco-travelers require less of those things. They require less expenditure and investment. And they make these decisions more rapidly than someone who, only goes to Disney World, or someone who only goes to the, Bavaria and back, The idea being that if you're spending less, then you're getting more from that expenditure anyway. So that's number one. Number two is that just in a raw dollar-to-dollar comparison, or let's say revenue-to-revenue comparison, eco-travelers tend to spend more. Not that, this is another a paradox. Many times they're wealthier than the average tourist. So what the population I'm gathering that you're calling eco-travelers is very young people who appear to be kind
Backpackers.
of... Right, backpackers, right. And backpackers are only one small segment of eco-travelers.
And this is part of defining that.
Precisely.
My general comment is that unless it's a completely new area that you are opening to business, you will not have, or hardly you will have a tourism that is destination that is only ecotourism or not. Meaning with this that especially in Europe where people are used to visit France, what we will tend to do, and you can see that when you are analyzing some of these charter areas, is that the business increase their quality of service. This does not mean that they are now 5 stars instead of 4 or instead of 3. No, they are 3 stars, but they are better 3 stars. So business improve their quality of their service. First thing. Business are more interested and more targeting the low season, because in summertime you don't have to make any effort because everyone is coming. So they are pleased because they are opening new periods of visiting. And people that are willing to spend more money don't want to spend more money seeing people. So they will come either sooner or later, but they will. And the other thing that is most relevant is that these people tend to spend a little bit more time than they come and go. And it's not a question of income, it's a question of costs. Because a 4-night stay has much less cost than a two stays of 2 nights, meaning laundry at least. So what you tend to see in most of Europe is that, except for very exceptional situations, and I don't want to anticipate one of the case studies Carol is showing, where they they start from scratch, and they are making money only on that offering. But most of the, I mean, I would say that diligent eventually would start with early adopters of a different way of offering the service, and these people will get these new tourists that are willing to spend more money, are more curious. They don't want to go to McDonald's, they want to go
Absolutely.
to so what is
and
changing?
one of the important things we have to do in Armenia is disassociate ecotourists with backpackers. I mean, that's one of the
Precisely.
first things we
Yeah,
have to do.
absolutely. And the final point to add on to that is precisely what, remember when he showed the multipliers earlier. Ecotourism, to switch it over to the vendor side, keeps money in the community because it's relationship to relationship at almost a retail level. And that means that unlike, let's say, I was gonna, everybody knows Las Vegas, right? Can I say Las Vegas? The only 20% of that money, that's the massive amount of money that's spent, stays in the community. So if you wanted to do a dollars to dollars comparison, you could only say that $1 and $5 remains with the people who are actually creating this revenue, and that most of it goes off to some, in some cases, reprehensible billionaire. This idea that if the money stays in the community, it moves around and benefits everyone, allows us to say that dollars that are spent at that level, in the consumer retail level, at the basic level, create better value just one-to-one. So even if you move aside and say, well, yes, perhaps they which is normally the case, but let's say here in Armenia we have a special case where eco-travelers might spend less. The idea that their dollars are essentially more valuable still holds right.
I just want to extrapolate my time.
Yeah.
She also has one question. I'm sorry.
Honestly, I don't remember now, sorry. I'll come back to you.
We can have a lot of, one entire discussion about it.
But I'm sorry, all of this is just tomorrow there will be these discussions. So I want us to be ready for these discussions tomorrow because they will come up at the conference. And people will ask, well, what does it bring to us? What is the value of this tourism that's going to come to it? What are they bringing? I mean, they're backpackers, they don't want to spend any money, they just hitchhike and this and that.
Come back to that ideas that actually there is this pro-poor approach which we discussed a lot in Central Asia. We said actually don't always damn the backpackers because the backpackers dollar is like staying 90% in the region, whereas like someone else who comes in with a tour operator only 10% or 20 stays in the region.
So all these points we have to make somewhere and kind of put it in the thinking, in the discussion. Sorry, you want to?
No, she reminded.
Yeah, I remember. Just wanted to understand where does the revenue come from the parks in Brazil? Maybe you said I missed it from the beginning. So
I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this right now.
Okay.
He hasn't even gotten to his
Thanks. And but also, just one note, we have to understand about sustainable tourists and sustainable destinations. Also, there are different things. When we do this economic analysis, we are very pragmatic. Everybody's tourists or visitors, local or local. And we are now in Brazil doing more analysis, for example, bird watchers. They are very specific. They are coming in smaller groups. They spend much more money, or fishermen, sports fishing in the Amazon. These people spend $10,000 to one expedition, and 90 people come in a year, and the entire traditional community can survive from this 90 people who comes 3 months a year. But I don't want to go to that.
It's a question of service.
Yeah.
It's not, tourism is no longer going to a hotel.
Yeah.
Hotel is the minimum.
I want to show really quick the study case of Brazil. If you want more information, you can access in Panorama. You have the publication. And I work with a group of other people, some people from the United States, South Africa, Georgia, a girl from Georgia, and we developed this model to make it easier for park managers to do economic analysis. And what we do we ask park managers to just give us two pieces of those three variables: number of visitors and visitor expenditures. This is the information that if we help park managers, they can gather. The problem is with park managers and in most of the population is to do the multipliers. So we offer them the multipliers and just ask them to give these two pieces of information. So it's still in an Excel spreadsheet. We are working to make it a website. So any park manager for any country can come and put the information they need. Just for you to show, here we have a park manager for developing countries. So we have taxidermy, this is for Africa, it's important, trophy fees, other different expenditures. But for Brazil, for example, parks just need to put the different segments they have in the park. If they have one or two, they just fill these two for cells with the names and the number of visitors they have in the segments. The spreadsheet will calculate the percentage of each segment, and then we fill with the information how much they spend per category. And if they choose Brazil and they choose a rural area, the spreadsheet gives the correct multipliers for that situation. We have multipliers from Brazil, Zambia, and Zimbabwe in the spreadsheet. And then the spreadsheet will do the calculations, and we will provide these tables for the park manager, so the protected area manager can create a report and give to the important people in the region to show them in a meeting, in a public meeting, how important is the park or the area. We have direct effects here and total effects. And they also, with the spreadsheet, provide some basic graphics information for the park manager. So we try to make it as easy as possible for a person with, even if they don't have, they just have high school, they can even also do some analysis. And quick, in Brazil, this is the data from 2018. And I want just to show you total effects in Brazil. We have in sales captured 1.2 billion. How do you call your money?
Drums. Yeah.
Drums. Generated in our system. We have 12 million visitors in 333 protected areas, and you're generating 1.2 billion drums, 89,000 jobs, 300 billion. About 300 billion drums in personal income, and 445 billion drums in GDP for the country. And we provide this information
one
for
park.
No, the entire system.
But so in dollars would be
It's the second one.
the second
$2.5 billion.
million.
Billion. Because it's in million, but now you have 2.5 billion.
Okay.
600.
Yeah, so I think it's, yeah, that's right. So the AMD is not right. The AMD is not this. Yeah, billion to trillion. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, trillion, sorry.
I'm stupid,
Trillion.
sorry, yes.
Yes. Yeah, all billion here, and here is trillion.
Yeah.
Sorry. We provide for all the parks who give us information, we provide information for the park, contribution impacts, so they can use in local meetings. We provide from the state what each state is making. We provide per category, parks, forests, those information. And this is what's really important in Brazil, because so far before this study, we only show to the society financial analysis, accounting analysis. We were only showing them how much money was our budget, and how much money we were making from fees and concessions and revenues and leases. And this kind of report would show this information. For example, so our budget was 7.9 billion drums in 2018, and now our revenues were just 9 billion.
Incredible.
And so politicians would look to our agency and say, okay, you are agency who are spending money, you are not making money to the country. or one part for the community.
Previous slide, in previous slide, 1/5 part of total expenditure here. 1/5 part of total is direct expenditure.
Which is-
how is economically evaluated this? Look, total direct effects 284
billion.
and total effects 1,290,000.
Oh, this to this,
No, the first.
this line to this line.
Yes. And if we look at national parks or protected areas, how economically is these figures evaluated?
I don't know if you understood your question, let's try to respond. So for example, when we calculate the money who comes from the pocket of the tourists to the hotels and to the restaurants and to the guided tours, we have this figure. When we include indirect and induced effects, the multipliers, and then this is the amount of money that is made in those ripple effects in the economy, and then we have the total effects, right?
Right. Look, I'm saying this, if I want to show my government that my protected areas can generate this amount of money, and in national level, is this fifth part one?
I want to say if this is like a general,
Is it general model or?
like the 1/5 is a direct effect from indirect?
The
Is this
case
a
of
question?
Brazil,
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
in the case of
yes.
Brazil, I mean, if you don't have in your economy developed all those services, well, you're not getting the effect.
I want to know
So-
the.
And multiply if it's 1 to 5, that's
Yeah,
the question.
that's the
Is it a Brazilian multiplier or is it a general
It's a
multiplier?
Brazilian multiplier. You have, if you want really good data, you need to develop them to Armenia. We have some generic multipliers you can apply if you don't have, if you still don't have those multipliers. But it's not so difficult to develop from IO input-output matrix. And also, for example, in Brazil, when we do local, we use local multipliers that are smaller than national. When we show national figures like this, we use multipliers for the entire country. And we use capture rates of 96% of the money stays in the country, for example.
This is work that needs to be done in Armenia, and it's not done. So that's why I think we really need to focus on these multipliers. The same thing happening in all the other industries. Tourism industries, like for instance, mining is arguing, well, look at our multiplier effects, but then they never talk about the multiplier effects of the other sectors. So I think we need to really get this multiplier effect.
Yes, the argument.
Yeah, get it
And,
down.
yeah, this is important for cost-benefit analysis, if you are mining the area or using for the national park, what are the trade-offs. So for example, when we used to show this kind of information in Brazil, we were seen as an agency who were just spending money. And after this study, we started to show them that just in Texas, we were making 1.6 more money than our budget. We were generating 410 million. I don't know the number is in reais, but we are making 0.6 more money in taxes than the budget they are giving to us.
So there's a return on their investment.
Yes, and they should give us more money so we could extinguish all that fire that people are complaining on. And when we go to the economic effects in general, our direct effect is 31 times bigger than our revenues, and is 3 times our budget, just in direct effect in the local economy. When we go to total effect, our total effect is 134 times larger than that we generate in fees. I don't know, 30 times more than our budget. And also we show benefits in jobs, income, GDP, and taxes. And in Brazil right now, we are doing 1/15. Each dollar invested in our agency, we generate 15 in the economy. I'm finishing my presentation.
What was Carol saying today, European averages?
7 to 10.
So 1 to 7 to 10. So Brazil, you're actually doing better.
Yes, we were doing 1 to 7, and we have some changes in our budget, so that number changed a little bit. We're improving our effectiveness. And with this, the information we show to government, local government, municipal GDP, how much they are making, park is making to them, how much park is making in taxes for the local communities. And to wrap up the information that I presented to you, this kind of analysis is a well-established methodology used in different countries all over the world, provides clear information. This information everybody, it's a common information most of people understand. Sales, value-added, jobs, income, and taxes. You can discuss with politicians, administrators, all over the important decision makers, sponsors and stakeholders. It's fast and cost effective. You can do this analysis. After we organized the analysis, the second year that we did was quite fast to gather the data and do the analysis. It's user-friendly. We're developing methodologies that are easy to park managers to use and understand, and it is intercultural. You can use in different countries. And to finish my presentation, my question is, is Armenia interested in doing this kind of studies, and can Armenia develop their own methodology and protocols and do this kind of analysis? And thank you for your attention and time, and sorry that I'm a little bit late.